Looking for tickets to the hottest shows, games, and events? Ticket Liquidator is your one-stop shop for great prices, no hassles, and guaranteed tickets. Since 2003, we've been connecting buyers and sellers, providing access to sold-out events at prices lower than most secondary market options. Whether it's sports, theater, or concerts, our massive nationwide network ensures you get the tickets you want, guaranteed. For the best seats at the biggest events, start with Ticket Liquidator today at ticketliquidator.com. That's TICKETLIQUIDATOR.com. Ticket Liquidator.
Are you ready to take control of your health? At 4U Health, we believe wellness and lab testing should be accessible, inclusive, and yes, fun. With our tech-powered at-home lab test, you save time and money while feeling your best. Say goodbye to long waits and office visits. Check your health on your own terms with 4U Health. Visit 4uhealth.com today and free yourself from traditional medicine. That's the number 4uhealth.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trail Daddy, your favorite Portland Trail Blazers podcast, if you are a person of taste and distinction, of course. I am Dave Deckard, star of Stage, Screen, Podcast Mike, and managing editor of BlazersEdge.com. And we are here at a happy time of year. Oh, my goodness, the best time of year to be a Trailblazers fan so far, because the Blazers have just won 6 out of 7 games. That's right. An entire season worth of winning in just 2 weeks. What is going on? We're going to talk about that just a little bit, as well as some of the players we should be crediting and a few other things. Let's run down that streak in case you've been hiding under a rock and don't follow. My goodness, the Blazers beat the Chicago Bulls back on January 19th. Then they went on the road. They beat the Miami Heat, which is always fun because of Pat Riley. How's that non-trade going there, Pat? Still sore about that? Take your L. They beat the Orlando Magic. They beat the Charlotte Hornets. They came home and lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but you can understand that one, the whole best team in the league thing, that MVP guy. If you're going to lose one of those games, I suppose this would be the one. However, instead of crumpling, they came back and beat the Milwaukee Bucks. Hey, Dame, how's it going for you? We're doing okay here. And then they beat the Orlando Magic again for the second time in as many weeks. They allowed the Magic only 90 points in Portland, after keeping them to 79 on the road in Orlando. Orlando's actually a pretty decent team. I don't know what's going on with them. Gosh, Mickey, we suck. But, you know, it's great to have the wins, whoever they come against. I understand there was a Charlotte Hornets in there. But, you know, like I said, there was a Bucks team, too. Miami's not terrible. Jimmy Butler played for them in one of the last games he's probably going to suit up for. And again, Paulo Banchero, the Magic, that's not a bad win. You got to love it. And you've got to love the confidence with which this team is playing. You've got to love actually quite a few things about this team at this point, at least if you look at this narrow 2-week window. And you know what? We're going to do that because let's be honest. How many other chances like this are we going to get? I doubt the Blazers will continue winning 6 of 7. The schedule does get harder and the season will go up and down, but it's kind of fun while we're in the midst of the up to actually admit that it feels good and to be in the up. As I've said in prior podcasts, the worst thing in the world is to take a position on the team and defend it no matter what. And so if you think they suck, which they kind of do, you can't enjoy the good times. And if you insist they're good, which they have been for the last couple of weeks, you can't handle any critique of what's going wrong. That's just garbage. That's all about you. That's not about the team. Here we actually talk about the team. So let's talk about what's going on with them. And I'm going to share a couple things that struck me. And we're going to compare the difference between right now as I'm recording this, the very, very last day of January, and 1 month prior, the last day of December. Now, I don't have access to the monthly stats right now, so we are not talking the month of December versus the month of January. We're talking literally their season average up to December 31st. Their average through all of December, all of November, and part of October, the whole season, versus how that changed after 1 month of play. And there are certain things that are going on that I think are pretty impressive. Let's highlight some of them right now. And I think the biggest, most striking jump comes in points allowed, or the points the Blazers give up to the opponent. At the end of December, they were 23rd in the league with 117.3 points given up, which was not great. Now, they only jumped a couple spots to 21st after January. But in 1 month, they moved their points given up from 117.3 to 114.7, a 2.5 point difference just by how they defended this month. And that is a big difference. To drag your season average up in 1 month, 2.5 points is actually pretty darn good. Technically, it's 2.6, by the way. So, look, the Blazers have been playing, I get it, some offensively challenged teams. But you know what? They lost games in January, too. They got blown out a couple times. But even when they're getting blown out, even when they're playing better teams, they're doing a little better defensively, and it's giving them a better chance. We can go on to a few other things. Their three-point percentage is up an entire percentage point on average for the year because of their play in January. And their opponent three-point percentage point is down a percentage point. So, in other words, they added a point themselves, shaved one off of their opponents. They are shooting better from distance, and they are defending the arc better. Not bad. By the way, opposing field goal percentage is also down a percentage point, so they're defending better overall. And I think most importantly, the point of emphasis, especially during this streak, their fast break points have gone up 1 point per game on average because of this month. And their fast break points allowed has gone down a point a game. In other words, the same adjustment they made on 3-point percentage, they made in fast breaks. They're scoring an extra fast break point a game, and they're allowing one less. Now, you go, well, what's 1 point? But again, this is dragging the whole season average. And again, you have to remember that most sane NBA games, now I get it, the Trailblazers have a wide point differential because they're not good. But a lot of NBA games on balance are decided by somewhere between 3 and 5 points, right? And the best teams get on the top side of that. The worst teams are on the wrong side of that deficit. But it's usually not that huge of a deficit. So generating an extra point somewhere or cutting down an extra point somewhere makes a difference. Now, fast break points is a little bit of a sketchy stat because it's how you score the points, not just that you score the points. But still, the Blazers have been emphasizing faster tempo. That's been a clear point of emphasis and a clear change in 2025 in January, okay? And usually what has happened is the Blazers have gone faster, but they have allowed the opponent to go just as fast, if not adding on a point or a point and a half of their deficit. In other words, good opponents were glad to see the Blazers start running the ball because for every point the Blazers scored, the opponent would score a point and a half. And so, hey, let's run. It's great. But Portland has been getting back better in defense, has been, I think, forcing a few more turnovers as well, has been committing a few less turnovers as well, and getting that margin more in their favor. Now, again, granted, they're not a good team. They're not going to be a good team. But we don't understand always how narrow the margin can be between looking really bad and looking decent, or looking decent and having a reasonable amount of success. And it's often just a couple factors like this where you were not doing well and you shore those up, like fast break points, or again, key in the modern NBA, 3-point percentage. Those are huge. I mean, the 3-point percentage is huge analytically. The fast break point is huge because it's a point of emphasis for the Blazers. In both areas, they've done well this month, and that's been really good to see. Absolutely, positively love the way the Blazers are playing right now. Again, results may vary, but as long as they keep playing like that, they should be all right. Now, granted, we had a stretch like this earlier in the season. In fact, in the first few weeks, they didn't win as much, but you were saying, hey, yippee skippy, this team is playing with a lot of energy. We like what they're doing. And if they keep this up, they'll be okay. And they did not, in fact, keep it up. That may happen again. Also, I think we have to credit that the schedule is going to get tougher. The Blazers have the Phoenix Suns twice. Now, granted, Phoenix is not doing as well as they thought they would. But Phoenix, I mean, any team with Kevin Durant can still be a good team, right? So that's tough. Then you got the Indiana Pacers. They're good. The Sacramento Kings have been on a huge run lately, just like the Blazers. You go on the road versus the Minnesota Timberwolves and then the Denver Nuggets twice on the road. You got the Los Angeles Lakers before you get the Hornets and the Jazz and the Wizards and the Nets. So you got 4 games at the end of February that you feel like you should have a really good chance to win. But before you get there, you have 7 games where it's either kind of sketchy or it looks really doubtful, which means the Blazers will probably start losing again soon. But that's okay. We can still hold on to this. And let's also take a look at the differences in what's been going on individually. Whose fault is this, basically? Well, I think, first of all, some combination of injuries or strategy or whatever caused the Blazers to mess with their starting lineup at least a little bit. Now, it has not been consistent. They've been playing different starting lineups all the time. But there's one that's emerged that's been kind of nice, which has been some combination of Donovan Clingan, Jeremy Grant, Denny Avdia, Toumani Camara. Those are the 4, usually with Anthony Simons. Yeah. Now, Simons is not a great defender, but those 4 were kind of locked down or good defenders. Okay. And on balance, they provided enough defense that Simons could hide in a corner, could do what he does, move around fast and be a little athletic and still cover a man. As long as the perimeter defenders would channel people into Donovan Clingan's wheelhouse, Clingan looked really good, and even Simons can manage that. So all of a sudden, the Blazers look pretty good on defense. That's what sparked it. That's what it felt like the horse got running in the right direction and found out that it could run, right? Now, again, that lineup changed. Clingan is still not playing more than 15 to 18 minutes a game. Now, Ayton was injured. DeAndre Ayton was injured. That's why Clingan came in the first place. But when Ayton came back in, there was a little bit more energy, right? A little bit more commitment. And also, his teammates had more confidence playing together, it looked like, defensively. So now they could cover a little bit for Ayton and a little bit for Simons, and it still kind of worked, especially since they were playing teams that are offensively challenged. Scoot Henderson popped into the starting lineup for this last game versus Orlando. He's a little better defender, somewhat at least, than Simons is. So now you have Henderson and you have Ayton. And by the way, Scoot's not bad at setting up DeAndre. So DeAndre gets a little bit of rub offensively, gets a few passes, gets going. Henderson defends a little bit. All of a sudden, the Blazers look really good defensively again. So overall, I think that starting lineup magic, that unit, with the 3 wings you'd expect, Grant, Camara, and Avdia. Plus, if Clingan's in there, it's super defensive. If Ayton's in there, it looks okay. And some version of a point guard has ended up working for the Blazers pretty well. The exciting thing is that at least 3 of those players, Clingan and Camara and Avdia, project to be with the team for a long time. So you have a little bit of a defensive core there. And, you know, people keep talking about, well, what happens if the Blazers get high lottery picks, which they probably will. All right. What do you what do you define high lottery picks by? Well, they're often offensive players. That's almost a given. You don't draft a defensive specialist super high usually. So they're going to have some scoring chops. If the Blazers can get even a little bit of a two-way player who can score close to 20 and add to that lineup, that's super duper exciting. Or failing that, if they get a transcendent scorer of, I hate to say Kevin Durant variety because there's only one of him, but those come along every once in a while. The guys who are bankable for 20 every night and probably will go for 25, sometimes go for 30. It looks like if you can slot that player into one of those slots, it might be point guard, or the Blazers might have to juggle a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. It could be a power forward. It could be a center. As long as they've got Kamara and as long as they've got Avdia in there and somebody else can kind of defend, you can probably absorb a super scorer. So there are a few options there. My point is, this isn't all bad, folks. Look, is a lottery pick going to single-handedly save this franchise? Probably not. Could a couple? Absolutely. Could you forecast a high-ish lottery pick fitting with this team now and making a difference? The answer is yes. And that's the big difference I think we're seeing mid-season now. Contrast that with the end of the season last year. I don't know if you remember how last season ended because people's memories are really short. However, this team was basically directionless. Scoot Henderson looked lost and was considered widely one of the worst rookies among the prominent rookies in the league, if not the worst. Toumani Camara had not developed. Denny Avdia was not here. The draft was projecting to be weak. So you had, basically, among bankable players, you had Jeremy Grant, for sure, who's 30, Anthony Simons, who could score but was still trying to establish himself as a bona fide starter on a good team, and DeAndre Ayton, who was talented but a big question mark. What can you add to that team to make a difference? Not much. You need a lot of things, right? There wasn't, unless the Blazers got someone like Victor Wembanyama, there wasn't going to be a transformation. And you couldn't really forecast. It was like they say square peg and round hole. Well, imagine the round hole is the size of a manhole cover, and your square peg is one of those toys that goes into kids, round holes or square pegs or whatever. Okay? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of shape you have. It's a square peg, triangle peg, hexagon peg. Drop it into a manhole, and it's just going to rattle around the bottom and echo and fall in the sewer. That's the gap that was missing in this roster prior to the draft last year, at the end of last season. Now, that manhole size is still pretty big, but it's shrunk down. Now you have Avdia filling space. Now you have Kamara filling space. You have Klingon filling space. You could forecast Jeremy Grant doing something for a couple of years if he has to stay. He's not a bad player to have, right? So look, now that round hole is smaller, yeah? So you still probably don't have a square peg big enough, but you can see where that square peg or whatever peg might fit and fill up even more space, making the gap smaller yet. So you're going, now I can see its shape. Now I can see what the Blazers need. And if we can find someone to fill exactly this sized gap, we're good to go. That in itself is progress. Not there yet exactly, but a lot closer than they were. I think that at least is somewhat exciting. There are people who say this franchise is directionless. There are people who say this franchise is going nowhere. I do not believe that. I believe that the hill this year is insurmountable. I believe that no matter how hard they pedal that bike, they're not going to get to the top, right? This mountain's too high. Their bike only has one gear or two. It's not going to make it. They're not in the Tour de France. Sorry, they're going to get beat. However, they're still on the road. And you know what? You can see the next mountain next year, and you can see that bike and their stamina improving between now and next year to where you go, hey, look, they're probably still not going to win the stage, jersey next year. However, they're going to be able to go faster. And you can see the direction in which they're beginning to go. And that's good. The thing that people lack is the patience to let it develop. I was going to get to this at the end of the podcast. I guess we'll get to it now. That people are so impatient. Look, I'm all on board with criticism of Chauncey Billups for certain things. I think it's taken him a long time to develop. I think his coaching is still somewhat inconsistent. I think he's been dealt a raw hand. We wouldn't know if he was a great coach, frankly, but it doesn't seem like he is. And I think part and parcel of that is this is his very first head coaching job. He's had really problematic teams since almost the beginning. So there's no way that he was going to develop into a really good coach. It's just not possible. You can't be a good chef if you're being given lousy ingredients. Your talent is never going to show. I think that's been part of the story for Chauncey, but I think after 4 years, we've seen enough to say, this isn't working. Chauncey needs to move from the IHOP to the Denny's or something or whatever it is to the next job, or maybe to a higher quality kitchen where we can see if he can get some more experience, some more training, and be better. Okay. I don't think that's going to happen in Portland. I think no matter how long he's in this kitchen, that the pancakes are going to come out the same. Fair enough. He's had 4 years to show that. Joe Cronin's first moves were to trade away Damian Lillard at Damian Lillard's request, basically. Okay. And before that, Joe Cronin had to go and get Jeremy Grant and, other players in order to try to convince Lillard to stay. Right. So look, it's ridiculous. And I know Neil Olshey got some of those players too. I get it. But you get the direction of the franchise. The direction of the franchise was building around Damian Lillard until it wasn't. Right? And when it wasn't, that came fairly quickly. And the momentum was all going one way. And it's like trying to turn a battleship. You can pull on the wheel, but that thing is going to take a long time coming around. The Blazers took an entire season just turning direction even 90 degrees. They haven't even made it 180 degrees yet. They're still pulling on that wheel. It's taken all this time just to drift the bow around. That's not a fair amount of time to judge the upper echelons of the franchise. They've had one complete season to cope with Damian Lillard's loss. And then they've had half of another season to try to develop some momentum in a different direction here. Not enough time. I think Joe Cronin gets another season to continue the rebuild if the Blazers decide to go that way. I'm saying, if they fire him, they do it. I assume that's for their own reasons. They may know more than I know. However, if Joe Cronin stays another year, it doesn't mean that the Blazers were incompetent. It means that ship is still turning and is settling on its different course and now needs to develop full momentum, full speed down that course before we can judge it. And it's the development of players like Avdia, like Kamara, like Klingon, and like Scoot Henderson that show this. I mean, look, what were the Blazers going to do? Were they going to not sign Jeremy Grant and just let him go? Then we'd be screaming at Joe Cronin. Were they going to not trade for DeAndre Ayton and roll those dice? Were they going to take level players instead whose contracts were going to just run out? That may have been smarter financially, frankly, may have given them some more savings and perhaps flexibility, but they would have had to go way down in the salary cap. If they were going to use any of that, that wasn't really practical for another 2 or 3 years. And you would have been screaming at Joe Cronin had he not acquired anybody in the Damian Lillard trade. So he got some players who were relatively decent. He traded away some more of those for players who were young. He got some future draft pick swaps that are coming up and another draft pick in addition to his own. And kind of the Blazers will endure the lottery for a little bit. It's not a terrible plan. If the Blazers could have gotten Victor Wembanyama, this all would look a lot better, but that wasn't in their control. All they could do was do the best they could with the situation they had. I'm not sure they did empirically the best thing possible. That's hard to say. Probably if we look back in hindsight in another 10 years, we will be able to point out things that they could have gotten a little more of an edge on with our perfect hindsight and knowledge. However, foreknowledge and foresight is way different than hindsight. And for what they have done, the Blazers have probably taken a pretty reasonable gamble. We just haven't seen the full results of it yet. And players developing, like some of the Blazers are clues that maybe, just maybe, this direction needs a little more time and a little more patience to see what develops. Now, again, I'm not going to argue that a change will never be needed. I'm not going to argue that this is the right direction. I'm simply arguing that we don't know yet. And it's enough at this point that this is a different direction than the one they were going in, because the one they were going in, they ran out of water right away. That wasn't their fault as much as it was Damian Lillard and his desire to go play for a contender. End of story. Now let's talk about some of those players as we close here that are part of the new direction, that look as if they might be here long term, or at least showing some hopes and promises. Now the biggest one over the last few weeks, really the last half of January, has been Scoot Henderson. We spent an entire podcast on him almost last time. Let's just hit this lightly and back that up. I mean back it up like support it, not reverse it. Because since January 14th, and I will admit to you, I'm doing a little bit of Haberstroh work here. I'm doing a little bit of pro-Blazers propaganda, and I will admit it. I'm going to select the dates on these stats that I'm not like picking some games and leaving others out. I'm talking about the time span that I'm measuring will be different player to player. I'm simply, instead of saying I'm going to measure from January 14th and do this completely empirically, I'm going to say, what do these players, these young players or unknown players look like when they're playing well? And I'm going to measure the span in which basically they've played well. I'm not only picking the games in that span in which they did well. There are ups and downs for all of them in there. There are games when they scored 20 and games when they scored 2. We counted both. But I'm picking, well, like, where's their upsurge? When did that happen first? And let's measure from that point until now. For Scoot Henderson, it was right around January 14th when the Blazers played the Brooklyn Nets. And in those 10 games, Scoot has averaged 30 minutes a game. He is shooting 51.3% from the field, and more impressively, 49.1% from the three-point arc in the last half of the month of January in those 10 games. 49.1% from the three-point arc. And what did we say last time? As soon as Scoot Henderson develops a three-point shot, he becomes a much different player. I don't know if he's developed a three-point shot yet, but 49.1% from the arc sure ain't bad. And you're watching him shoot with confidence and shoot quickly. You're watching defenses have to react to that. And that is cleaning up the floor, and it is cleaning up his dribbling and passing lanes. And the results are absolutely everything that you could hope. He's also getting over 4 free throws a game, which is not too bad by his standards. 5.9 assists versus 2.8 turnovers. Right about a little more than a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Good enough for Scoot. You like that. And 17.6 points a game. The points, I think, are almost immaterial. I mean, I like them, and I think they've contributed to the Blazers winning. But if Scoot scores 15 or Scoot scores 20, I think the Blazers can deal with that either way. They can make up those points at other positions. What they can't make up is the three-point shooting at the point of attack, spreading the defense. Defense is actually having to guard 5 players instead of sagging back into the lane and guarding, 4 players with 5 defenders, because nobody has to pay attention to Scoot until he dribbles and drives. Also, the assist to turnover ratios, keeping those turnovers reasonable. That's all the Blazers needed in order to see an upswing. And I think Scoot Henderson is right near the heart of this surge for the Blazers. And he may be the biggest or maybe the second biggest difference maker on their team right now. And boy, look, even being able to say that is a huge, huge thing. We were hoping to be able to say that at the start of this season. Rejoice, Blazer fans, at least for one point in time, you can look at Scoot Henderson and say, wow, that's why he was drafted third. Wow, this is going really well. That is music to everybody's ears. Now, the other guy who, of course, has done it, and he's been surging in the whole month of January, his upswing goes back all the way to December 26th, just after Christmas with the Utah Jazz. In fact, I probably could have counted the Dallas game before Christmas, too. That, of course, is Deni Avdija. And he is shooting 50.7% from the field in 33.5 minutes per game over his last 16 games. That's, again, 51% from the field from a wing over his last 16 games. That's more than a month of play. That is absolutely fantastic. Anytime you shoot 48% or above, you're probably a legit threat. You're doing something. That he's shooting almost 51% is fantastic. Now, he's taking 5 threes per game, basically, only shooting 32%. We still have a little quibble there. That could go up a little bit. But if it did go up, he would change from a 19-point-a-game scorer, which he's been during this last month, to over a 20-point-a-game scorer and a near star. I mean, look, so the Blazers were debating whether they wanted to trade Damian Lillard for the guy who is now an Eastern Conference All-Star in Tyler Hero, right? And Hero's scoring like 23, 24 a game, granted. But Hero doesn't bring defense. And Hero plays shooting guard, which is a position the Blazers already have enough players at, right? Avdija to come in at basically a small forward who masquerades as a point guard, has the ability to defend any of the 3 lower positions, the small forward, shooting guard, or point guard, and can also pass the ball. That already is an upgrade systemically over what Hero would have been. If Avdija gets close to scoring like Tyler Hero did, then this is not just a home run, it's a grand slam. And granted, I mean, 18.9 points per game is different than 23 or 24, right? However, the difference for Avdija is if he can get that 3-point percentage up to 35%, let alone 37, he will probably top 20 points a game, and he will become a massive, massive asset. As soon as Avdija starts hitting his threes, he becomes another Scoot Henderson in terms of stretching the defense, causing them to defend him at the arc, but he can also drive a little bit, and he can also pass the ball. That triple threat will make him scary. And again, that he can defend as well and play multiple positions. Oh boy. So this is what we're hoping for Deni. Okay. Little higher on that 3-point percentage, and he will change from what has really become a very good, very nice player for the Blazers to almost a star. So keep your fingers crossed. By the way, that 51% shooting from the field, that's already more than star-like. Okay. Free throw attempts, 6 a game. Way to go, Deni. That's the other thing that's really been helping him. Oh my gosh. That wrinkle right there, drawing those free throws, gives him the extra points that, again, turn him from a role player into a potential star and certainly a legit starter. 8 rebounds per game, more than fantastic. The assist to turnover ratio, 4.2 assists versus 3.2 turnovers. That's not very nice. But again, he's your secondary point guard. He's not your primary point guard. He's really a small forward. The fact that he has the threat of those assists and the threat of scoring now kind of makes up a little bit for the extra turnovers. He'd prefer those turnovers to look more like 2.2, but you know what? If you have to give up something with Deni, give up those turnovers, say those are okay. They're usually turnovers of commission, not omission. They're turnovers of aggressiveness, not being timid. They're turnovers trying to make a play rather than bailing out into a not smart play. You will take them. If you wish for one thing, say keep the turnovers, make the 3-point percentage go up, and we're going to be just fine. Speaking of 3-point percentage, one guy there's nothing to argue with over his last 7 games at least is Toumani Camara. And his upsurge in 3-point shooting almost mirrors the Blazers' upsurge in winning. They've been winning the last 7 games. His 7, he missed one, so they don't exactly overlap, but close enough. Since the Blazers played Houston back on January 18th, Toumani Camara has been shooting 42% from the 3-point arc, 58% from the field. Now, what's the knock on Camara? He's not an offensive player. And I know people are saying, well, he's, whatever, 3 and D. His 3 wasn't there. The D was always there. The 3 wasn't there earlier in the season. And he's not a driver. I mean, God bless him. He's been doing it more, and that's very sweet and nice. And I think he's developed a little bit, a rudimentary game, right? But you're not comfortable seeing Toumani Camara take the ball on the floor. And defenses actually will live with that, all right? But when he's shooting 42% from the 3-point arc, not only does it open up the rest of his game, i.e. 58% from the field overall, it also is the final piece now. Because, look, if Henderson is hitting him, if Avdija is at least a threat, and if Camara is a legit threat, is shooting really well from the 3-point arc, what's the defense going to do? This is why you see Portland centers. This is why you see DeAndre Ayton able to roll into space. This is why you see Donovan Clingan, who is, his rebounding is good. It's steady, but it needs a little work. But this is when you see him excel. When he's in there alone and he has a little space to move, not extra defenders clinging on to him, and he's just going center against center or center against opposing forward, and Clingan can get those offensive rebounds and putbacks right near the bucket where he likes to shoot. This is why. Because Portland's wings, like Camara, are spreading the floor and shooting well. Makes everybody better. 42% from the arc is great. We need not belabor Toumani Camara's defense. It's already fantastic. He is a revelation. He is a development. He is the player who is most guaranteed to stick based on what he has shown this season. The player who has taken the leap, and it has not been offensively up to this point. It has been defensively. He is guaranteed to be on the floor because he can defend. And, Coach Billups is giving him that respect. He's averaging 33.9 minutes per game over the last 7. The Blazers can't take him out of the lineup. They can't take him off the floor. 7 rebounds, also great. 2.7 assists is not too shabby for a guy who ends up being your power forward or ancillary forward on the floor. I mean, let's put it this way. Henderson is taking up touches, and Anthony Simons is going to take up touches, and Denny Avdija is running a lot of possessions. So Toumani Camara is not initiating a lot of offense. That he's still getting 3 assists per game talks about not just his unselfishness, but the unselfishness of the team. And the last guy that probably deserves some credit is the guy you're going to throw your hands up and scream at, although do not do that if you're listening to this while you're driving. But hey, credit where credit is due. DeAndre Ayton has had some pretty good games lately. Now, granted, there have only been 5 of them because he's been inactive for 4 out of the last 9. So during the Blazers surge, over the last 9 games since mid-January, he's only played 5. But you know what? He's shooting 60% from the floor in those last 5 and scoring 18.8 or almost 19 points a game with 4.6 offensive rebounds per game and 11.4 rebounds total. Now, let's forget the total rebounds. Ayton's going to Ayton. He's going to get 10, 11 rebounds per game no matter what. He always has. But 4.6 offensive rebounds per game is huge, as are those 19 points for the Trailblazers, whose offense is really suffering. this is a sore spot for Portland, always has been. Their defense has looked somewhat better most of the season. Their offense is why they're losing games. Ayton being able to score, and Ayton being able to score off of offensive rebounds is something that they've wished for. Here's why that matters. I mean, the offensive rebound, second chance points are okay. But here's the problem. If guys like, Kamara and Avdia and Grant are getting them, although Grant won't because he's not a great rebounder, but you know what I mean. That means that 2 or 3 Blazers are underneath their own bucket trying to get those offensive rebounds, which means the other team, if they get the rebound, is probably running out and scoring easily. If Ayton gets them, he's the center. He can be the last person down the floor, and that's okay. When you see Ayton getting almost 5 offensive rebounds per game, Portland's plan is going right. That's actually very exciting. This is drawing board stuff, right? Before the season, there were obviously some points of emphasis. One of them was to go faster in tempo, which the Blazers are now doing. One of them was to get offensive rebounds, which DeAndre Ayton is now doing. He's become, over the last 5 games, small sample size, but it's still working, the center that the Blazers hope for at that position at this juncture. And you've got to credit that. It's good to see. His defense has not been bad. He's had a couple really good defensive games. And you know what? You can make up for that not quite as good a defense as you'd hope with that 60% shooting and with those offensive boards. There are other little things. Ayton gets a couple assists, a steal per game. That's fine. His turnovers are down 1.2 per game. You more than live with that, especially for a player who's playing almost 33 minutes. You just, look, I get it. I think Ayton's probably going to be the guy that ideally would go off of this lineup down the road. I don't think he's going to blossom into a superstar. I don't think his effort is any more consistent than you do. I think that's been made obvious by everyone, from the most casual fan to analysts to even probably the coaching staff and Ayton himself. It's not there every night. It's frustrating. The defense isn't especially always there. I get it. I get it. However, the man has been playing well over the last few weeks, and that's okay. It's okay to say. It's okay to say that this DeAndre Ayton is the right DeAndre Ayton, not just for himself, but also for this team. And the Blazers need that. I mean, the Blazers would not have gone on this winning streak without him. So, hey, bravo. Now, as we close here, there are those of you who will say that, well, the winning is counterproductive. Why wouldn't the Blazers just trot out Klingon for 30 minutes or Robert Williams for whatever? Well, first of all, Klingon couldn't stay out of foul trouble. And by the way, you're going to blunt his effectiveness and his confidence and his everything by throwing him out there to get eaten up. I think it's much better to have targeted minutes for him, so his conditioning, his confidence, his rotations, his everything kind of grows up in a way that is sensible. Also, Robert Williams obviously is not able to play full time. Otherwise, I think we would be seeing him a lot more. So there's that. So thank goodness there's DeAndre Ayton. That the Blazers are winning is a nice side effect or casualty of this. Again, that won't keep up. But I say, look, go for every win you can. I know the lottery and I know the long-term hopes. I get it. I understand that well. But at some point, like I said, you've got players on this team that you do intend to keep. You get players on this team that you hope will grow into your future winning squad. That very much includes Avdia and Kamara. It probably includes Donovan Klingon himself, and maybe Scoot Henderson, hopefully Shaden Sharp, and a few more people, right? At some point, this team has got to experience confidence and success. They've got to at least have a glimmer. They've got to look at each other and say, oh, this is what winning basketball feels like. This is why we're playing unselfishly. This is why we're getting back in transition. This is why we do what we do. If you have none of that, if you have zero, it's a lot harder to build it up than if you have something to hang your hat on, even if it's small. Winning 6 out of 7 isn't too much to grieve, isn't too much to suffer through for a season, even if you're hoping for high lottery picks. You got to hope that the basketball gods are kind to you and respect the work that you're putting in and actually reward you with a little ping pong ball luck. Because that's way better than starting to do well and having someone tell you or play you like that's wrong. Otherwise, what are you doing here? If you're there specifically to lose, then losing is what your franchise will be about. All of you have been in some kind of pissant job, right? Where the manager was lousy. And I'm not talking about, look, people run with my analogies and say, who's Joe Cronin and who's Chauncey Billups in them? Not every analogy coordinates one-to-one with an actual person. I did one online about a politician that applies to no one in the Blazers organization. And people spent like all day trying to figure out who is this politician. Nobody on the team. It just exists for the purpose of the analogy. Same thing here. You've all been in some pissant job where you've done the best you can. You came into this job working your ass off, showing up on time, doing the little detail work right, throwing your heart into it, giving enthusiasm, and your manager sucks. Your manager doesn't contribute, is lazy. I used to have a manager like that in one of my first jobs. She would put us to work at the cookie shop that I worked at in the mall, believe it or not, and then she would go off to get materials for the shop. And I'm making air quotes as I do this. And we would see her again like 3 hours later after she had gone all around the mall looking for materials for the shop, coming back with a little baggie of something that was who knows what. Now, how long do you think it felt good for us to continue to devote all our heart, soul, detail work, energy, passion to this job? Not long. Now, I still did it because that's my personal ethic. However, most people don't. And you don't want that to become the story of your franchise. These players are out here to win. They're giving their all. They're working hard. They're training. They're practicing, keeping their bodies in shape, trying to be unselfish, getting back on defense, and blah, blah. The entire goal was to lose all along. Nobody really cares about winning. Well, then why should I care? And that culture can get into your franchise pretty quick. There's going to be enough losing for the Blazers this season without them even trying. It's okay to have some winning, even if it maybe puts them in a little more precarious lottery position. I promise, I'm pretty sure 10 games from now, we'll be headed toward the right side of the lottery again. We'll have to see. But until that happens, enjoy the confidence that the players are building together. Enjoy those high fives, the jumping off the bench, the fist pumping, the coordinated defense where they're actually talking to each other for a change, where they're actually running back and stopping the opponent from scoring instead of watching them from half court, and the enthusiasm with which the franchise and its players are approaching these games. It's a big deal. Don't underrate it. Let them have their wins. And speaking of wins, before we go, don't forget to click on blazersedge.com. Find the post right below the cover, right below those pretty pictures that says how to help Blazers Edge or how to help kids in need. And click through that link and buy tickets for underprivileged kids to go to see the Portland Trail Blazers play the Cleveland Cavaliers in March. We still have a few hundred tickets that are undonated. We absolutely need those covered. Please, please, please. It's as easy as buying tickets from the Blazers yourself. Instead of going to your account, you just use your credit card and buy them, and they go into the pool for these kids and their chaperones. We want to make that event successful. It depends on you. If you like this podcast at all, please take a minute and buy a ticket or two, not so I can go, but so underprivileged kids can go and they can enjoy this Blazer fandom just like you do. All right, we will be back with you soon. Until then, let's hope for more wins. Yay to all the Blazers who have contributed to this massive streak, and let's enjoy February.